Welcome back to the State of the SEL. I'm Mr. Bepic, and I'm here today to make predictions on the last 20 series that have already happened in the playoffs, so I'm guaranteed to not miss a single one. I'm be doing all that in the next 20 minutes. So, here's 20 series in 20 minutes in this episode of the State of the SEL. First up, UTK versus ECU, the number 1 overall seed versus the number 16 overall seed. And it went just about as expected. UTK handled business against ECU, who made a great run through the last chance qualifier. But UTK 7-0, now 8-0 following this series, looking good to keep that undefeated run going. And then South Carolina and Clemson, a big South Carolina in-state rivalry match. Super excited for this one, and with Clemson being as hot as they were going into this series, I thought it could be a barn burner, and it was close, but South Carolina, they handled business. They got it done in 4 games. Good win for the Gamecocks, who I had some questions about coming in, seeing if they could beat some of the teams that didn't have a couple of weeks off. And they did. They beat Clemson, who looked really good in the last chance qualifier. So they move on to play UTK. Then, in the upper bracket, Georgia State and Oklahoma playing each other. Georgia State, a team that I had high hopes for, was beaten by the Sooners in round 1 in game 5. That one was a heck of a series. It was all 1-goal games until game 5, when Oklahoma was able to take down Georgia State by a pretty decent margin, which is a big win for the Sooners. Another one of those teams that didn't look super hot in the last chance qualifier, but had a commanding finish to that bracket, and they continue that run of good form here in the upper side of the playoffs. So, team to look out for going forward, playing the winner of Kentucky and UAB. This was pretty much an expected stomping of UAB. You gotta have some series that go the way of the heavy favorite, and Kentucky took care of business. They cooled off the Blazers after a quick 2-0 last chance qualifier run out of UAB, and they move on to play Oklahoma. Now, Florida State and Auburn. Florida State, again, a team that you're wondering, do they get cooled off by not having an SEL match for a little while? And the answer was no. They beat Auburn in 4 games. Kind of what you'd expect if you've been watching these two teams play this season. So, Auburn down in lowers. FSU move on to play the winner of Georgia and the UAH Blue Chargers. Okay, this is a series that you would expect UGA to win, with their second place finish in Group 1, only losing to the undefeated UTK, but UAH seems to be the only team that went 2-0 in the last chance qualifier that kept that momentum going. After their good showing at BBB, they show up in playoffs as well. It's a 3-1 over UGA to push the Chargers forward, and all 1-goal games too, so it was close. But UAH finding ways to win, looking good moving on. And finally, our last 2 series on the upper bracket in round 1, King and FAU, which I had as the marquee matchup of the week on the upper side. I thought King was the favorites, but FAU definitely had them on upset alert, and for good reason. They beat King in 4 games on the mainstream. It was unbelievable. They did it while Lil Stan was subbing in for Damage, which that change we'll talk about, of course, as we talk about FAU again, but it seems to be a permanent one, moving Lil Stan in there for Damage, and he looked the part. FAU played as a team. Their defense was rock solid, but King missed a ton of opportunities in this series. So many post hits, so many skied shots when it had to be on target, and that gave FAU openings that the Owls more than exploited. So King's got to avoid performances like that going forward now that they're in the lower bracket. But FAU move on, stay on the upper side, and they play Cumberland, who play in Florida in round 1. You know, you'd have Cumberland as the favorites there, but it was a close series. Went to game 5. Cumberland does end up taking it, though, but it shows what Florida can do against good teams going forward. And then in the lower bracket, Clemson and ECU playing each other. And ECU took out Clemson. The lower bracket run continues. ECU, just a team that plays well with their backs against the wall. They put Clemson in the lowest position the Tigers have finished in SEL history. Clemson has never finished that low, and that is the end of Snipes' SEL career, which is very sad. And you know, I'm so glad that he's helping out behind the scenes now, because I would miss him to death if he was no longer involved with the SEL, but I will miss him on the pitch. But ECU taking out another team in the lower bracket. Good for them. They move on. And in the Georgia State's UAB matchup, UAB end up moving on. They upset Georgia State in Game 5, and they did that after losing Game 4 9-1. In that series, the Blazers got blown out by 8 goals in Game 4 and then come back and win Game 5, denying the reverse sweep attempt by Georgia State. Absolutely insane result. Georgia State going out 13th to 16th is not something I saw happening. That is probably the most insane result of the entire playoffs so far. And then moving on to the next series, less of an insane result. Auburn again falter against a really good team in UGA. They bow out in 4, but again, it's kind of one of those results that if you've been watching these two teams play this entire season, it went to plan. UGA took care of a team that really hasn't been able to get going this season, and they move on to the next round. Then we've got King and Florida. Another pretty favorable matchup for King, I would say. But it goes to Game 5. Florida again going to Game 5 against a top 8 group stage team. Almost beating them, but they couldn't quite get the job done. So Florida's out, but I'm very excited to watch them in the spring. All of these players are new to the A team for the Gators, and they put together a great string of results in the SEL this season. Weren't able to crack really into that top 10, but they were right there on the doorstep. They just went up against 2 solid teams in playoffs and couldn't get the job done in Game 5. So goodbye to the Gators. King move on. Now we're going to hop back up to the top side of the bracket and start talking about our top 8 on the winners side. First matchup, UTK and South Carolina. This one isn't a traditional SEC rivalry, but it's becoming a traditional SEL rivalry. These two teams, I don't know. They don't care for each other very much. There was a lot of smack talk on LAN during Season 3 when UTK 3-0'd the Gamecocks in the winners finals in that playoff bracket. And here, the result, the same. UTK sweep South Carolina. It was super close though. All 1-goal games, but Joe Burrow popped off. I think in the final game, he had 100% goal participation, shot 80%, scoring 4 goals on 5 shots, and hit the overtime winner as well. Like, he could build a highlight reel just straight up based on that third game. It was an impressive win for UTK, so they'll be guaranteed top 6 on the upper side of the bracket, putting South Carolina on the lower side now, and they will play King, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But still on the upper side, another great classic SEL matchup. It's Bono and the Oklahoma Sooners versus Unfriable Apples and the Kentucky Wildcats. It's a classic that Oklahoma wins again. They upset Kentucky earlier in the season in group stage, and Kentucky just couldn't get it done again. It was a 3-1 that the Sooners won, and they continued their big run of play. The Sooners have beaten Alabama, they beat Georgia State, then they beat Kentucky, 3 pretty much top 10 teams in the SEL going into the last chance qualifier. They have looked so impressive in this stretch, and now playing UTK next week, we'll see what they can do. Then FSU and UAH. FSU just is infallible when it comes to avoiding the SEL bracket chaos. They 3-0'd UAH Blue like it was nothing, and they keep on making a run in this playoff bracket. Outside of that Game 5 loss to South Carolina Garnet several weeks ago now, FSU has really not succumbed to any kind of chaotic tendencies that we typically see in the SEL. So Seminoles move on, Chargers dip down, and then the last upper bracket matchup we're going to talk about today, FAU and Cumberland. This was a tight series, and Cumberland was able to come out on top of it, which they've been on an up and down stretch I have mentioned a lot, but I got to start talking about them going on the up and up consistently, because taking down FAU in Game 5, I don't care if it's a close series, that's still a great result after what FAU did to King. So the Phoenix, part of the top 6 guaranteed, and have a chance to move on to the winners finals when they play FSU this Wednesday. So we'll see what they can do. But FAU dropping down to lowers amid all of the chaos of the single elimination bracket down there. And speaking of that chaos in the lower bracket, ECU definitely the distributors of a little bit of that chaos. They play FAU in round 2 of lowers, and they get swept by the Owls. Their run ends 9th through 12th. FAU just kind of brought the Pirates back down to earth. It was an 11-3 stomping in the 3-game set, and simple as that. The Owls move on, the Pirates sink. And then the next matchup, UAH versus UAB, an intra-Alabama matchup that gets me excited. And again, it's a commanding win for the favorites. UAH Blue 3-0 the Blazers, and they claim another SEL top 8 for that storied name in the SEL. So congrats to them. Then moving on, USC and King. South Carolina coming in without Solar. He's on fall break, so wasn't able to play this week. SJT subbing in, and they had to go up against the full King roster. So those that are familiar with the SEL this season, it's been Big Wade instead of Storm in every single series except this one. King had to make the sub in. Big Wade wasn't available, so the top 48 team in the country in Collegiate Rocket League plays South Carolina, and the Gamecocks are a good team, but they're not that good, unfortunately for them. So the reigning 3rd place team out of Season 3 out in 9th through 12th. King move on to the top 8. And our final series, there's a reason I left it. Kentucky versus UGA, the reigning champs versus the newcomers to the SEL-ish. Georgia hasn't played since Season 1, but fresh roster. They're coming in hot. UGA is off the back of a win versus Auburn. Little SEC rivalry there. And then here, same deal, SEC rivalry. Kentucky's trying to regain after their loss to the Oklahoma Sooners, and they can't do it. Game 5 loss to the Bulldogs. Kentucky went up 2-1 in that series, but they couldn't hold the lead, and they drop in Game 5. 2 straight 1-goal games for them. And it hurts. The reigning champs going out 9th through 12th. I feel for them. Don't know what Kentucky's going to look like going forward in the SEL, but whatever they look like, we're going to have to wait to see them again in the spring split as UGA move on to the top 8, and we'll see how far this lower bracket run of theirs goes. And that does it for my playoff recap for SEL Season 4. Hopefully all of you that didn't watch the first 2 weeks of playoff action are all caught up now, all satisfied with the chaos you've seen so far, because I can only imagine it's going to get even crazier as the playoffs move on. But thank you for watching this video. Hopefully you tune in Wednesday, 6 to 8 Central Time for more SEL playoff action over at twitch.tv/HSV Gaming Oasis. And then Thursday, of course, for Valorant playoff action as well. Same time, same place. I think I went a little under 20 minutes with this video, so forgive me for breaking the promise I made in the intro. But hopefully you enjoyed. Hopefully you'll still like and subscribe and cater to selfish attention-needing tendencies by just straight up watching the video. Either way, I appreciate you, and I'll see you in the next one.